gives jurisdiction to the United States government. In this case, there was no agreement reached where there was jurisdiction for this post office to be to give a jurisdiction. What happens? The governor has to sign. The governor of Arkansas would have to sign the necessary documents to give joint jurisdiction. That didn't happen, I assume, because it was a relatively new post office. Also, the second thing was that if Ms. Cooper had been deemed a federal employee, that would have given jurisdiction to the United States government. She, on the alternative, was a contract labor employee, so they did not have jurisdiction. On that basis, significant research was conducted on this by the U.S. Attorney's Office. They concluded the United States government did not have jurisdiction because of those two reasons.
Mike, a quick question for you. Something I tried to ask you a few months ago, but you couldn't talk about it. When, in the period between the time Mrs. Cooper was killed and the time that the suspect was arrested, was the sheriff's office in any type of communications with him through telephone or cell phone or anything like that?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
I had got his phone number from a relative, and I had talked to him 2 or 3 times that morning on the cell phone to try to get him to turn his cell phone.
Okay. And what was his general state of mind as you interpreted it during this point?
He didn't talk a lot. He asked a few questions, but obviously he failed to turn himself in, and we later located him.
Can you describe what he said during these conversations? Did he talk about the homicide? Did he even say that he'd done it, or what?
No, he made no admission to the homicide during the conversations that I had with him that morning. When I contacted him on the cell phone, I asked him to come to the Waldo Police Department, and he was basically asking me a few questions, but he made no admissions.
When he was taken to the hospital, and you said he was taken to the hospital or examined?
Which time he was taken to the hospital? A number of times. So which time are you talking about?
Right after his arrest, you said he was tested for several drugs and he tested positive?
Yeah, that's correct.
Are you able to say what drugs those were?
Cocaine and meth for sure. I'm sure marijuana pills. A smorgasbord of drugs is my memory.
Thank you.
Can you speak as to the reaction from both families as your communication with them before and after today?
The reaction of the victim's family, of course, Mrs. Cooper was a fine, fine woman since stayed this one, and the victim knew Mrs. Cooper, and they knew each other. Actually taught in Sunday school. Either Mr. or Mrs. Cooper taught in Sunday school. It's a small town of Waldo. Everybody knows everybody, so it was a very devastating problem for them because the defendant's mother, Mrs. Blackmon, is well known to the family and their friends. They actually hugged in the courtroom one day, and so it's a terrible situation for them because she's a fine lady. And the reaction is, if once we were able to negotiate a plea agreement to get this matter behind everybody, the last several death penalty cases that existed in southern Arkansas were in excess of 20 years old. We had one in El Dorado where a defendant was found guilty, given the death penalty 20 years ago, and he's still on death row. I think the sheriff and I talked. You got, while Sheriff Loe was working as a detective for the state police, you had 4 death penalty cases, and all of them are how old?
Some of them are pushing 20 years old now.
So a death penalty case involves a number of appeals which may last forever, and in this case, because the overwhelming guilt of Mr. Blackmon, it was determined by all the parties to get this matter behind us and to do this plea agreement. So, anything else, folks? Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you.